and delivery of land projects. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A and we'll answer them at the end. I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, I'll pass you on to Ian.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Jamie. Just as we move through the slides, if I can manage that. That's the title for today's webinar. And kicking off from me, really compulsory purchase has been the prerogative of Parliament for centuries, but it only really got into its swing with the coming of the railways in the first half of the 19th century. And the present state of the law can be traced back to the Land Clauses Consolidation Act of 1845. It's perhaps hardly surprising then that compulsory purchase systems and processes are largely paper-based and use pretty out-of-date Harry Potter-esque terminology like the Book of Reference. Even construction and project management projects have moved from paper onto spreadsheets and beyond that now into smart systems and applications. Yet in the CPO industry, we're still paddling around in spreadsheets that we change and modify project by project. It's incredibly inefficient, and particularly for big projects, Excel just really isn't up to the task. But at the moment, there's nothing on the market to manage compulsory purchase cost, schedule, and risk issues. And if we really want to escape spreadsheet hell, then digital transformation is going to require us to reimagine how we do our business with relational database technology working for us rather than the other way around. When I joined Crossrail back in 2011, we were fortunate in being able to use Phoenix, the system Adrian had developed at TfL for compulsory purchase finance. And that was a big factor, I think, in being able or allowing us to keep within the 860 million project budget and to deliver it with a pretty lean team. But while the project as a whole had GIS mapping, SAP for financial data, ARM for risk, P6 for schedule, there was no interface between those systems and our Phoenix system, and we had to spend inordinate amounts of time trying to knit them all together into effective reporting so we as managers could take decisions and update the board. Digital transformation in our industry, I think, is long overdue. The holy grail for projects, certainly, is to have a range of systems dealing with each of the key project areas, but all of which talk to each other and interface automatically. Decision makers really need a single source of truth with automatic reporting where they can see issues together and how they impact on each other. With COVID-19 in particular, I suspect that the genie is now well out of the bottle. Lockdown has forced us all to use digital solutions and prove they can be efficient and reliable. PINS has had its first digital public inquiry, and I think that clients moving forward are going to increasingly be demanding a digital first approach. I'm going to pass on now to Adrian to walk you through some thoughts on
that. Thanks, Ian. My first dabblings with IT systems came in the early 1990s when I was put in charge of the Jubilee Line extension. We started to use Excel, and Excel was an incredibly powerful tool in terms of doing the initial property cost estimates. You would do your assessment per building, have a tab on your Excel spreadsheet per assessment, and link that through to a master spreadsheet. That worked really well. Soon came off the rails though when we started to engage with third parties because Excel couldn't manage the many-to-many relationships. You don't pay the compensation to the building, you pay it to the individual landowners within that building, and you get many different landowners with many payments over many different financial periods, with many different commitments, many different status, etc. And Excel just could not manage these many-to-many relationships. So out of the ashes of this Excel hell that Ian articulated, we developed the specification for the Phoenix system, which proved extremely successful It developed over a number of years, and in the last 20 years that I was at TfL, £1.1 billion worth of compensation was managed and paid right through the Phoenix system, and that was managed within 1% of the budget. And a large part of that was down to the confidence that we had in good quality data informing management decisions. Had some very useful dashboards, it drove the right behaviours of the individuals, and gave us some very useful insights to manage the data real time. But as Ian just mentioned, it was still yet another silo. So the arrow shown on there, so the data flows between Excel from initial estimates through the Phoenix system into SAP, they're all manual data transfers. None of these databases talk to each other. Next slide, please, Ian. Since leaving TfL, I've spent probably my first 2 years just going around the industry to try and understand what good looks like. I've talked to some major acquiring authorities, I've talked to local authorities, council, lawyers, etc. And what I want to do is give you some insights as to what they were saying. And this has all led to the development of our AFFIRM system. AFFIRM stands for Acquisition of Financial Risk Management. So right at the top there, I mentioned that Excel is a really good tool for doing your property estimates. So we want to harness the benefits and the flexibility you get of using such Excel databases. But what it's poor at is managing the data going forward. So why not have a direct link between your initial Excel spreadsheet and the database system for managing the compensation and phasing, so that when you're starting to make payments to individuals, you can compare that against your original budget. You've got everything in one place and you can track the variance very easily. Land referencing is really, really important for doing your initial property estimates. You need to kind of group together the individual parcels that are owned by the same party. And if you could get the database to identify adjacent ownership on graphs and send that through to the suppliers so they can check whether that's the right unit for your budget assessment, that would greatly simplify the time and effort that's made in making your property estimates. And secondly, when there are any changes in the land acquisition, such as changing the limited deviation or powers, could flag up the additional areas that need to be assessed. So you've got an integrated solution between the two. This is something that TerraQuest are working on at the moment, and by the end of this year, they should have completed the development of their portal. Stakeholder management and SRM systems are well understood. They're supposed to be the central source of truth, but in practice they're not, because stakeholder management and details about parties is not the master data for land in the limited deviation. Your master data is the stuff that's in your land referencing. So why not have a link between your land referencing data and your stakeholder management? So you've got a central source of truth. You can also combine that with financial data and the progress of engagement with third parties and firms. The key thing coming out of it when we talk to some of the major acquiring authorities is what they're not after is a property solution. What they're after is a project solution. So they want to take the detailed case management and integrated solution that we just talked about above and integrate that with existing project-wide systems such as ARM for risk management, SAP and Oracle for the payments, and your schedule in P6. So you get a truly project-wide end-to-end digital solution. Next slide, please, Ian. So what the client wants to know is it cash flow accurate? I mean, budget. If not, why not? What progress are making against the claims? What are the risks? How are we managing them? So to do that, you need good quality data. And good quality data starts by getting those people who are responsible for the detail to be inputting that, which are your transactional surveyors, your case surveyors doing the negotiation. If they enter the data real time, then you get a single source of truth to inform decision making. A relational database such as the Phoenix system or firms enables you to slice and dice the data to present dashboards relevant to each decision maker. Because each decision maker, whether it's in treasury, it's in your finance department, it's in your senior managers, your board, etc., they've got different decisions to be made, and they need to be presented with information relevant to their particular decision. The real task that needs to be done is to marry up the high-level assessments per building with the drip feed of compensation that comes from detailed information from engaging with claimants. And as you start to marry up the forecast for individual payments with your budgets, it's going to create variances. You need an audit trail as to what was the cause of these variances, who did it, where and when, so you confidence to those people in authority that you're in control of the budgets. Question I'm regularly asked is, can you compare the budget from 2 years ago with what it is today to explain the variance of X million pounds between the two? So having a system that can do that in a press of a button is extremely important. And you need accurate cash flow. This is something that all major projects have really struggled with. It's dead easy to do a cash flow when what you're doing is you're adding together the sum of any payments that are forecast for individuals. But in the early stages of a project, you don't have payments because you haven't engaged with the individuals. So how do you do the assessment of your cash flow? We did it with Phoenix by identifying the timing at which I anticipated to take possession, but it was quite a clunky way of doing it, very labour intensive as well. So, what we think good looks like here could be to have a look at what the cash flow phasing is for each head of claim. Head of claim is like acquisition of land or disturbance or fees, etc. If you benchmark those relative to the valuation date, you come up with a graph similar to the one that's coloured pink in the bottom of the screen there. So they've all got different timing of phasing. And if you apply that to the compensation assessments that have been done on Excel, then you can do an expenditure profile to give cash flow similar to the diagram right on the right-hand side of the screen. Next slide, please, Ian. My impression, having been in private sector for 3 years now, is that risk is something that's generally very poorly managed in the industry. And it's so difficult to manage that generally it's not done, or it is done poorly. When you do your initial property cost estimates, if something is more likely than not, then you put in your point estimate. So if you look at the diagram bottom right in the blue box, that is kind of the element of your total budget, where something is more likely than not. In the early stages of the project, towards the left-hand side of the screen, you've got various risks. Risks are based on the assumptions that you've made, and if you think a risk is material, then you'll do your assessment. In the early stages, some of those assessments are done project-wide because you can't assess them per building. Quite a lot of them are done per building, and very few of them are done for individual parties because you haven't yet started engagement with them. As time goes on, as you move from left to right on that diagram, some of these risks start to crystallize. And you want to understand whether the sum that's being crystallized means that the sum of risk that you've still got left in your pot is adequate or not. So you need to understand what the trends are. You need to understand the rate at which it's being crystallized to see whether or not you're likely to be going over budget or not. So you need a system that integrates both your risk and your PCE. My impression, having managed risk over a number of years, is surveyors generally hate managing risk. They want to do their transactions. They don't like managing the risk. But the trick to doing it effectively is to get them to own the risk. So the case surveyors, they need to be the ones who are setting these risks. They need to be the ones responsible for updating it. And they need to be then accountable for any changes in the total forecast, not just your point estimate, but your point estimate plus the risk. And that's what we think good looks like. And if you can get that to happen, then you can slice and dice the data and produce dashboards similar to the one in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, where you've got kind of a list of all the risks, and you can sort it on each of the headings there. So this one's currently sorted by the total value of the risk. That's the biggest risk first, but you could sort it by the risk type. You could sort it by the likelihood of that risk materializing. It gives you useful information then to start prioritizing what your engagement is going to be with third parties. The question is, are you going to automatically then feed this information through to kind of project-wide systems such as Zactium, ARM, etc.? And that could be quite complex to do, but we're certainly talking to one party at the moment who wants that to be done. Next slide, please, Ian.
Right. Thanks for that, Adrian. Adrian's already talked a bit about us creating this real-time link to land referencing data. Clearly, land referencing is a sort of quasi-judicial process of diligent inquiry to identify those parties that have a legal interest in the land affected by a project. It's used by acquiring authorities to notify affected parties at key stages of the CPO process, to identify who to engage with prior to inquiry, and again when exercising statutory powers. Taking advantage of increasingly sophisticated GIS and relational database functionality, allows land referencing providers to capture, manage and present data more efficiently. Managing reference data digitally also allows acquiring authorities to respond to project design and requirement changes quickly, whilst maintaining an audit trail for all the data that's been affected. The Planning Inspectorate announced in January this year that they have ambitions to make CPO books of reference and the plans digital. On that basis, affected parties would be able to effectively type in their address and see what powers are being sought over their land, to overlay maps with context drawings, to see the programme for construction and acquisition activities, and indeed all the potential advice to claimants would be available in one place, covering the process, how to go about claiming compensation, how to manage payment of fees and so forth. I think that would be a huge step forward in terms of our approach to customer relationships and engagement. Another benefit might be to overlay planning applications and consents on the land referencing data. Given that TerraQuest, for example, manage the planning portal, it would be easy for them to give surveyors instant access to data that's fundamental to assessing development value claims. My experience on Crossrail is that you should only map the project in one place, however. Geospatial land referencing data becomes a key base layer for project data moving forward. Whilst it's used to secure powers, it can also be linked to stakeholder relationship management systems and act as that single source of truth for engagement. Combining the geospatial, compensation, case management and stakeholder management data would provide a really powerful tool for objection management at public inquiries. From a single system, Council would be able to have a live dashboard like the one illustrated on the slide here, showing real-time progress in acquiring land, and then be able to drill down to broader data on engagement in the stakeholder management system itself. That's something we'd be interested on hearing lawyers' views on, and perhaps when they comment later, I can see it being enormously useful at a DCO inquiry, for example. When I joined Crossrail in 2011, we were something like 60% of the way through the time available for exercise of powers, but at that stage had only served about 30% of the notices. I decided that if I wanted to keep my job, it was pretty important to then try and use the data to build a program management system to break down the service of notice process into its constituent parts and give ourselves visibility of the task ahead, so that we could see not just where we'd been, but actually project forward when we thought we were going to land all the notices. However, what I think is really needed is something to automate the exercise of powers and access to land process. Land referencing data, again, holds the key to this, and we could automate notice production and also link it to project-wide cost, schedule and risk systems. That allows for proper project and program controls for a major project, with all the land and construction cost, risk and schedule all managed in one place. On top of that, there's no reason either that the land referencing can't then be used to form a base which is overlaid with other things, with construction drawings, with BIM modelling, with estate management data, and finally the as-built drawings and title plans, again creating that single source of truth for geospatial data. So in summary then, an integrated digital future for CPO is definitely not a theoretical pipe dream. Myself and Adrian have seen firsthand the savings in compensation that were delivered for TfL and Crossrail, ensuring both a big reduction in risk and also efficiencies in resource, because you can deliver better outcomes with fewer people. We believe in it so passionately ourselves that Adrian and myself have made a slightly worryingly large personal investment to develop the first modules of Affirms, and create that dynamic link with land referencing. Our aspiration is for very much a fully integrated end-to-end solution based on the honeycomb type diagram that you see here. And that's our vision of an integrated digital future. But we want to know what yours is. Happy to take questions.
Right, so there doesn't seem to be any questions at the minute. So if you have any, now's your chance.
So you can either pop them in the chat below, or just raise there that you want to talk, and we can always add you in. So if anyone's got anything that they want to say, go for it now. Oh, yeah, so there is one there. I'll hand over to you, Jamie.
Okay, so how does this system differ to Lars' system from TerraQuest?
Well, Lars is just is one of the databases that exists out there. There are other databases developed by other land referencing companies. Yeah, but our vision for the future is to be able to link these existing databases to be able to then leverage, right, the information that you can get from it. So it's, as I intimated earlier on, if you can kind of link, right, for example, the geospatial information that we contained in the system such as Lars, right, through with what the contractor's requirements are, then you can visually show, right, per plot the land a contractor wants to occupy, pre the exercise of powers for enabling works, for surveys, for intrusive work, etc. And you can identify competing requirements for land, etc. So all sorts of different uses that you can make, right, once you integrate it. But the trick is you need to build the foundations for that, and therefore you need to be able to integrate systems such as Lars, right, into a tool that will then talk to other databases.
But Lars, if I'm correct, shows all the parcels and the parties that have been identified by the land referencing process. What the Affirm system or other systems would allow you to do with that is to then show what the compensation estimates are against each of those plots of land and all the claimants, and therefore be able to manage the overall cost of CPO and see the risk and schedule as well.
Okay, thank you.
We've got one from Tim here as well. He's raised his hand, so I'm going to click the allowed to talk icon. Hopefully this should work. Tim, let me know. I'm going to go for it now.
You're on mute, Tim.
You're on mute. So you need to unmute yourself and then.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, good crisp presentation, guys. So as the ex-project director of the Lower Thames Crossing, one of my underlying concerns was, and it's reflected in projects like Crossrail and HS2, what confidence have you got, and can you sort of just delve a little bit deeper that systems like this will be able to give project directors and governing boards the confidence that these budgets can be met? You know, public confidence is fairly low on major projects such as High Speed 2 and the Lower Thames Crossing. And there's kind of a cynical inevitability. Oh, well, yeah, well, of course, these costs will just increase again and again. How much confidence have you guys got that pushing this forward will begin to hit the mark that you've become accustomed to in TfL within your 1 or 2% budgets?
Well, it's been quite interesting for me, right, having worked with Phoenix for 20, 30 years, and then coming out to the market and seeing how the private sector do it. And I was struck recently by a major compulsory purchase acquire authority, not HS2, a major authority, who have delivered an exemplar project and it was just coming towards the end of the handback, and property was going along swimmingly, and all of a sudden, whoops, property is not going along swimmingly. We're now going over budget. And this, for me, is a typical theme that you see, because there is a reliance, quite rightly, on the transactional surveyors actually doing the negotiation of compensation. They will report up to the client using Excel, but the client doesn't have any information to make them intelligent clients. They can't see what the quality of the data assessment is. They can't see what the original assessment is. They can't see how the drip feed of engagement with third parties and the payments and the proposed forecast. They can't see how that relates to the original budget. There is very little in the way of reporting and quantification of the individual risks that underlie each one of these assessments, and the logistics of doing that for many, many hundreds of different assessments mean that you need an army of people to try and do it effectively. Clearly the need for this being properly digitized. So do directors at the moment have confidence that it will be delivered properly? The answer is no. It's something that is difficult to do well. I myself, when I came round to develop the specification for the Affirm system, I spent must be equivalent of 30-man days just working out how to do the calculation of the cash flow. Bear in mind, I've already done this once for TFL and Phoenix, but learning the lessons of that, how do you do that? How do you make sure you get really good quality data? If you have a wonderful system in the world, but if you've not got good quality data going in there, then it's junk in, junk out. So I spent a huge amount of time trying to make it easy for the people who are undertaking the initial assessments, whether it's external valuers or it's people on the client side who are managing that, make it easy for them to do their particular task. And it's really, really difficult to do. If it had been easy to do, you wouldn't have over £20 billion worth of compensation being managed in Excel at the moment. It's difficult to do and difficult to do well. And I'm perhaps in a unique position, having developed a system for TFL in Phoenix, which was very successful in understanding what good looks like, and more importantly, what didn't work as well. So it's So how much confidence do we have, Tim? I think if you've got a big project or a medium-sized project and relying on Excel, I wouldn't be confident at all.
If I can just add to that, I don't think that we would have been able to deliver the Crossrail land acquisition within budget without a system like Phoenix that was giving us real-time data to be able to take early risk-averting decisions based on the evidence of what was actually happening on the ground in real time. And I think you've also got to bear in mind that the risk profile of CPO is quite different to the risk profile of construction projects. Construction projects, the big risk is early when you don't know what's happening, you don't know what's in the ground and what you're gonna find, and you've got to put all the logistics and plans in place. But with CPO projects, often the biggest risks come right at the back end of the program when you can least afford them. And I think if you are relying on Excel to be able to project that kind of risk, you're really storing up problems for the future.
Okay. Doesn't look like there's any more questions. So if you have any, just pop them in the chat now and we can answer them in the next minute. But thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a look out for any upcoming webinars we have. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.